Hi, this is Laptop Radio. Today's topic is blockchain privacy and GDPR. We have Young Edgood, an activist for a better digital society, on the phone. Hello, Young.
Hi, Michelle.
Hi.
How are you?
Where are you based now?
I'm in Geneva,
Awesome, awesome.
Switzerland.
Welcome and thank you for being here. We're really excited about talking about blockchain privacy and GDPR. So let's begin with what is your story?
Well, long time ago, I've studied law and computer science, and for quite some time, I was working in this narrow niche as a CPO for legal information systems in Germany and Switzerland. And 3 years ago, I really saw that society is having quite a big problem to cope with new technology. So I decided to change. I quit my job and I started a PhD, and I'm quite active in conferences, in NGOs, and also teaching a bit and doing my PhD at the University of Geneva.
That's super awesome. I'm really glad that you're doing this because I think privacy is very important because I think the first internet, we didn't really have privacy. I think society gave up a lot of that, and especially with blockchain. So when did you first become aware of blockchain and how it could change the world?
Well, I got aware of Bitcoin sometime in 2011. I downloaded the code, I tried it, I even set up my computer as a miner, but well, only tried it for a short time. I was a bit skeptical. I was thinking that it is a beautiful concept, but I was skeptical. Well, unfortunately, of course.
Why were
In
you
2000,
skeptical?
well, I was skeptical because I thought, well, everybody could set up their own blockchain, and why should one blockchain be valuable and the other not?
Hmm.
The crowd decides. If there are many people, many miners on one blockchain, it gets more important, more trustworthy, more valuable.
Hmm. Yeah, I think I don't mind the mini blockchain because I think it allows for developers to have and validators to have a choice. And I think over time, we're going to find out who will survive and who won't, and what users and developers prefer. But let's get into GDPR. So let's begin with definition. You know, lawyers really love definitions because it kind of defines what we're talking about in a better way. Of course, it doesn't have to be perfect, right? So how would you define what is privacy?
Well, privacy is an old concept known much before data protection, and is the ability of an individual or group to seclude themselves or to seclude information about themselves and thereby express themselves selectively. But of course, data protection is much more than privacy.
I agree with you. Yeah, because
but
we're
but of,
touching data security and then of course identity. And I think there's always an interplay between privacy, security, and identity. Because when you have privacy, you protect identity, and you need security to have privacy and identity protection. Privacy itself is super important. Do you think that's a human right?
Sure, it is. Well, if you look into um, um, the European fundamental rights, it's included there. Um, I think it's even included in some UN declarations. So it is definitely a human right.
Awesome, awesome. And let's talk a little bit about GDPR. What is GDPR?
Well, GDPR stands for General Data Protection Regulation, and it's a EU regulation. And it's quite strict, and this regulation has extraterritorial effects. This means when US companies process data from EU customers, or they track EU website visitors, the GDPR will in many cases apply. Of course, now we have other countries joining those strict regulations. We have the Californian regulation that is quite advanced and is going in some places a step further. So it's became kind of a model law in the world.
Yeah, I love, oh, I love. I really appreciate the fact that EU thinks about individuals' privacy and rights ahead of the world. And I think it's very important that a country does. And I'm glad that it is the EU, and I'm glad that California considers the regulations from the GDPR and decides to modify it as needed to protect the consumer's privacy. I think we need it the most now, right? Given what happened to our data and privacy, and at the abuse and the misuse from different corporations today. And let's also define blockchain. What is a blockchain?
Well, maybe first let me say something more about GDPR.
Sure.
Data protection was originally brought up to protect us from the government, from the state. So it was not anything that we wanted to protect us from private corporations. But of course, this is one main thing now.
Mhm.
But the protection against the government spying on us is got a bit lost in the process. So in many cases, governments are excluded from GDPR, and we don't have sufficient protection against government collecting too much data from us. And basically, what we also see that GDPR has an effect on small business, on small associations, even on individuals, that they are getting into conflict with GDPR. So in some places, GDPR is now limiting the freedom of speech. And this is a negative tendency that we should try to balance correctly so that we don't limit our freedoms in the name of GDPR.
So GDPR has cons and pros.
Yeah, of course, yeah, it's a law, and its application is controversial, and you have a lot of fundamental rights, and you have to balance them correctly, and there will always be a discussion what is the right balance. So it's completely normal. There's nothing that is only positive. No fundamental right stands alone.
Yeah, and I'm looking forward to GDPR being modified and changes to it as time goes along. I mean, I was referring to the big corporations because I think European nation, the EU is always known for its awesome privacy regulations, even though it has different disadvantages to it. I'm really glad that California has its own privacy legislation now. And considering a lot of the impact that the big corporations have on consumer, because it will have profiling in one of the element of it, and I think that's very important. And when I say profiling, I also mean profiling with AI and other technology that can discriminate, and I think that's really important to note there.
GDPR has a provision on automated decision making, but it's a bit limited. So people are discussing whether to amend this Article 22 with new laws, especially concerning AI, less about blockchain.
Yeah.
So you asked me how I would define blockchain. Well, do you seriously ask me? I guess you make a lot of podcasts about blockchain.
Before we define blockchain, or we try to define blockchain here, I wanted to have a disclosure that even though Chang is in has a legal background and I'm an attorney, we're not providing legal advice. And surely we're not providing investing advice. And we're just talking about the technology and blockchain privacy and GDPR, more for general information. So I just want to make sure that we are really clear about that. So with that out of the way, let's define blockchain. Yes, and I'm asking you.
Okay, so let's keep it short, brief. Blockchain is a distributed ledger organized in blocks. So it's an easy definition, but what is a distributed ledger? It is a store of data. Some call it a database. I don't, because I think database is a bit different, with coded rules and a consensus mechanism. And so you can have well, every participant holds the same copy of the data without needing a central authority. So in a way, it is decentralized because you don't have a central authority, but unlike other decentralizations, you still have the same copy at every participant. And blockchain always adds new blocks and never deletes old blocks. So information generally stays on a blockchain as long as the blockchain exists.
Awesome, thank you. And I think it's really important to define the blockchain definition because here I think we're speaking about a public blockchain with validators and nodes. And I think this is really important because when we talk about privacy and GDPR and some of the pros and cons as it applies to technology, it's kind of important to see what the limitations of the technology is, how it is defined, and who is defining it so that we can properly to learn how the laws could apply to it. Just really out there, there's a lot of people like lawyers are really not really clear about what blockchain is, and they also are not, they don't really have a holistic perspective on the law because for the first time ever blockchain requires multiple disciplines of the law. So that's one of the reason why I think it is important for the community to always ask, what do you mean by this? Because even if we're talking about blockchain, there's also permission blockchain and just different way that the technology can be utilized and configured and designed. So let's talk about blockchain and GDPR. So there is a right to be forgotten in GDPR. How is that compatible with the immutability of blockchains?
Yeah, of course, it's the most obvious problem of blockchain and GDPR. But the right to be forgotten is not absolute, and we have quite some other situations where we have immutable information. Imagine you publish a book, and this book is printed in 1,000 or 1,000,000 copies. It is stored in libraries at private homes worldwide, and this information cannot be deleted. So it's our first decentralized system where we make information immutable. So, but nobody told us that we have to burn books now because we have GDPR. So is immutable information where we have a justification to have it immutable, and it is completely fine with GDPR. But of course, there is a lot of information which should not be immutable, and every blockchain system comes with some off-chain storage, well, almost every. So whenever you use blockchain, you don't put everything on a blockchain, but you have other storage possibilities as well. And there you can change, modify, and delete the data. It depends what you put where. And when you put some data on off-chain storage, you can still put a validation entry, a hash, on the blockchain. And if done correctly, this hash will be useless once data that has been stored off-chain is deleted.
I'm just thinking about like IPFS and the number of servers. Even using those, the right to die and the right to be forgotten, is that even possible with technology? I mean, we have a lot of issues with regular server. Now we're talking about the blockchain.
So, well, IPFS is also a distributed system, and of course, if you put information on IPFS and then put the hash on the blockchain, then you don't have any protection because basically IPFS is storing and indexing information by its hashes. So it's kind of a giant rainbow table, meaning that you can get from a hash to the information itself, meaning the hash on the blockchain will tell you something about the information which it wouldn't be able to do otherwise. Of course, we have a lot of different information system, and actually the internet does forget. Of course, it does store also quite a bit, but also it forgets quite a bit of information. And we have to make the distinction, what kind of information do we want to preserve? Because for centuries, the humanity cared a lot about preserving information. They built big libraries to store information, to make sure that knowledge is not getting lost. So preserving information, rendering it immutable is very important. At the same time, it is also important that we can get rid of personal information that we don't want to store anymore.
I am concerned about pigeonholing humans with AI and blockchain as you don't allow humans to change. Is there a way to amend information on the blockchain? If not, how do we conduct a privacy by design where information could be changed?
Well, of course, information on the blockchain can be amended. So you can always have a new block which amends information to the old block. And basically, that's how all the cryptocurrencies work. So maybe you have a number of Bitcoins today, tomorrow you transfer it to somebody else. Of course, then you need to amend the entry on the blockchain that you're no longer the holder of those Bitcoins. So blockchain can do so, but of course you should not put this kind of information on a blockchain. So there are some people out there that say, well, let's put everything on a blockchain and then let's start AI to learn from it. And I don't think this is the right approach. Basically, there are a lot of things that you should not do with a blockchain to be privacy and GDPR compliant. And there are other things that you could do and should do, but you should have the right privacy design. And when you use privacy enhancing technology, basically you can create systems that protect privacy even better than classical systems. Because in a classical system, in classical environment, you have a central intermediary, and this intermediary and their administrators, they have access to all the information. And this is a risk in a digital society, that we victims of the big intermediaries that can basically decide on our future. And if there's a sanction, if you violated some rules of some big corporation, basically they could block all your account and you cease to exist digitally. So it's very important that we have some independence from these intermediaries, and that we have a system that is based not only on one party, but on many parties. It's a tool, and you need to use this tool in the right way. Then it can foster human rights and can foster the privacy of people. And this is a thing that I like about this subject, blockchain and GDPR. It is something that can blockchain can foster GDPR quite a bit and privacy quite a bit. At the same time, there are conflicts that are there as well. So you have to see both sides, and you have to find the right balance and use it in the right context.
What about accountability in distributed systems?
This is a very important question. So when you distribute data to many people in order to preserve it so that the data cannot get lost, you cannot hold everybody accountable. So when you print a book and send it to many libraries, are those libraries accountable for what's in the book? Most cases, no. So we have to basically see blockchain nodes as kind of providers for distributed information, and talk about rules of accountability. When it comes to GDPR, the CNIL has said that for public blockchain, the node operators and miners are not accountable. There are other opinions there. The CNIL is the French Data Protection Authority. And when you look at the accountability of blockchain transactions, you can distinguish between different levels. You have the level of the blockchain, you have the level of smart contracts, perhaps in the middle, and you have the level of transactions. And for a transaction, everybody that sends a transaction is accountable. And for the blockchain, there is, according to the CNIL, to the French Data Protection Authority, there are situations where you don't have accountability. Usually, this is not necessarily a problem. And if you say, but there has to be somebody accountable all the time, it means that you basically ban peer-to-peer technology. So is it really better to force people to go to a big intermediary that can be held accountable? Or should the individuals be free to choose not to go to an intermediary, and then, of course, go to a peer-to-peer system where they know that on the system level, nobody's accountable?
Unless there's a smart contract between nodes.
Sure. The smart contract is also a level where you can have accountability. Let's compare to email. When you send an email, who is responsible for the email you've sent? Is it your email provider, or is it you? And depending on what it is about, in most cases, it is you that is accountable. Mm-hmm. And the providers that just transfer the email are not accountable for the email. So you also have some lack of accountability on the system level, but you as the party who is doing the transaction is accountable.
Correct. I think there's a law that gave ISPs safe harbor or accountability and different
Yeah.
platform. So that's a little bit changing with content moderation requirements now. But let's focus on Node. I think I have another question about that, and that is with decentralization. Even though there's no concentration in terms of one party or two parties, all of a sudden there could be multiple pairs of eyes, right? So what are your thoughts on node operators and privacy? You talk about accountability, right? But with no operator, there's also an element of privacy because all of a sudden, all these people can see the transaction.
Well, of course, if you are on a public blockchain, everything is public. So the node operators see everything and the public sees everything. And even in permission blockchains, you distribute information to a number of people, and you shouldn't do so if this information should stay private. There's even more. You could spy on the internet traffic between the nodes, and then you could, for example, find out from what IP address the information has come from. This is the reason why Bitcoin operations are not at all anonymous. And it is possible to find out where a Bitcoin transaction came from. And this is also the reason why we have privacy chains where we add a level of privacy, cryptographic privacy protection on the transactions. So you can find out that there has been a transaction, but you cannot find out the content of the transaction.
Correct. Besides notes and the right to die and the right to be forgotten, there's also the jurisdiction aspect where blockchain is global. GDPR is not right because it's really EU, even though a few countries are adopting privacy law. How do we make sure privacy and human rights are congruent so that we become one nation, one new internet? I went to the United Nations Internet Governance Forum where you spoke about blockchain and privacy. That's really awesome. How are we changing the internet?
Well, we have the problem. We have a global infrastructure. We have global internet. We have global blockchains, and we still have national rules. And
Correct.
this creates problems. And some people think we should have global rules, and I'm one of them. Other people say, well, but we should still have national rules, and we still should have different rules in different countries. But it doesn't go together. Either you have a global medium, you do global communication, global exchange, global transactions, then you need to have global rules. Or you isolate countries, then you can have local rules. And what we see it, for example, in the freedom of expression. There's no global standard for it. And we are beginning to see the consequences of it, meaning that some information is forbidden in some country and it's allowed in other countries. And at first, people didn't care so much about it and say, well, internet is kind of a free space where no law applies. But in reality, it's rather the other way around. It's a space where all laws apply at the same time, which could be quite threatening concerning the freedoms in the internet.
Yeah, it was really powerful. I mean, I heard a lot of people speak out at the open mic, and I thought it was really interesting because there are some nations that don't even have access to the internet. And I'm just wondering how the decentralized internet will look like ideally. But we can talk about that later. Is there any guidance from you on how to build compliant blockchain-based systems?
Well, we have been working in a standards group from the German standards organization DIN, and this is going to be published soon. It's DIN spec 4997, and it's called Privacy by Blockchain Design. And it especially addresses how you could use blockchain to foster privacy, to build systems that provide better privacy than conventional systems. So there is some guidance there. There's not a lot of guidance out there. So that's the reason why we were working in this group. There is some guidance from other standards organizations. There are some articles out there, and it's increasing and it's getting more specific. We still have quite a bit of legal uncertainty. So we still need to figure some things out that we can provide this legal certainty that people need to have. But it's advancing, and technically speaking, there are quite some options available to provide very good privacy.
And what is your vision for the blockchain ecosystem?
Well, there's no one blockchain ecosystem.
What is your vision for
there,
the many blockchain
there,
ecosystems?
there are many of them. And what we currently see is that we see the creation of many consortium blockchains,
Mhm.
large consortium blockchains. For example, takes the Spanish Alustria blockchain, the Latin American blockchain, and you have the academic Blocksberg blockchain, and even German cities have agreed to create their own blockchain. So we see a lot of consortium blockchains that in many cases are public, but that are using proof of authority. And the advantage also is that one big disadvantage of Bitcoin, the huge consumption of energy, can be avoided by creating those consortium blockchains.
Awesome, awesome. I wanted to see changes in the blockchain ecosystem. I think mine, I guess, is to see more woman involvement in it and distribute wealth.
Okay, sorry, I'm misunderstanding your question. Of course, this has changed quite a bit. When blockchain was created, it was a nerd space where crypto nerds created some nice toy.
Yeah,
And of course, this has changed quite a bit, and it is understood that it is something that concerns society. And now we see a lot of different involvement in groups that want to have a say, that want to be involved.
yeah,
And we also see a lot of women there. We see much more diversity coming in because we also need to address much more diverse questions. It's not just the technical questions. We need to address legal questions. We need to address questions of our society. We need to address uh, quite a large range of questions. And if you look just at one domain, you won't find solutions. So it's very important that we work interdisciplinary in a diverse fashion. And I think this is happening.
yeah, and I think privacy basically intersects with all the ecosystems of blockchain. Well, I spoke at Blockchain for Science. Privacy in science is big, right? Medical, AI, and blockchain usage. Privacy is really important there because who wants to be profiled and pay high insurance? And as a person, right, as basic human rights, as an identity, do you want our financial information to be shared and estimated? All the information could be shared to actually identify you. Only like metadata could be shared, and with one or two sources of data, people can identify and source that to you. I really think that privacy touches just so many ecosystems of blockchain. And I think I also want all the founders of blockchain projects to really listen to this and really think about what you say, John, and think about privacy by design. And before they architect their blockchain solution, to really think about, hey, what about privacy? Is there anything that we should think about when we design this? What should we do with people's data, right? I think that's more of a mature ecosystem because we have so many exchanges that are hacked and private policies aren't really doing much, right? We've seen a lot of companies who breaches their own privacy policy. It's kind of funny. So how do we as a community make sure that the people who are creating the new internet become accountable, as you said, and think about some of these issues involving privacy and GDPR? I think that will be cool, and I look forward to that. Let's talk about the new decentralized internet because I'm really excited about the new revolution. What do you want to see change with regards to a new decentralized internet? I guess ideally, what would the new internet look like to you?
Well, that's a large question. First, maybe let's get into a very blockchain specific one that's decentralized IDs. It is an application where you can provide better privacy than the current credentials.
Hmm.
because when you show your driver's license, you have to show your name. When you have to prove that you're over 21, you have to show your ID, and it contains your name, and it contains your age or your date of birth.
Yeah.
And these are information that you don't necessarily have to show, have to present. So with decentralized IDs, we can reduce the amount of information you have to provide,
Hmm.
and at the same time fight against the problem that otherwise on the internet all information that you have ever provided might be combined to a complete profile that you might not want to share. So these kind of applications provide better privacy, and the decentralized internet, well, internet is just a medium, but decentralized web, decentralized application is an application where you don't have intermediaries that control everything and that basically exploit our data, our profiles to sell us things that we well, maybe shouldn't consume. So there are quite some visions in it. When it comes to blockchain and privacy, basically you should use really a privacy by design approach, because the old approach of taking an application, building it, not thinking about privacy, and then asking some lawyers to draft some privacy policies does not work. Especially, it doesn't work because you need to build it in to the system. So it really is technical privacy. And also, you have to do it right from the start, because you cannot easily change something once it's on a blockchain. So it is very important to do privacy by design. Concerning the internet or the web itself, we currently see all those consent things that don't work. We have to consent to 50 pages of privacy policy every 5 minutes, and nobody is going to read that, but we all have to lie that we have read and even more understood it to be able to continue to use this website.
I actually read the consent statements and the privacy policy because I usually draft them. I just don't trust the operator, because even though it looks really awesome on paper, I don't know what the companies are doing. I'm like, some companies, right? Not every company. Like, what are they really using facial recognition for? And are they using my photographs as a data set? What does that mean? Am I consenting to things that I don't know about, right?
Well, I completely agree. And basically, the reason is those privacy policies are usually drafted by lawyer, and the systems are usually developed by software developers. And of course, they don't always talk with each other. So you have a nice privacy policy and you have a nice product, but they don't have anything to do with each other in the worst case. My opinion is that we need a different way of consent. Some people say they want to abolish consent. I don't think it's a good idea. But we should have something like data unions, data protection agents that will basically help us to understand privacy policies and act in our place. So we should be able to say, well, I want to read all those privacy policies and I want to decide on myself. So we should make sure that we keep this freedom. At the same time, people that don't want to do it, they should be able to say, well, I trust this organization, and this organization should tell me whether it's a good or not acceptable privacy policy. And this organization might even have a much more bargaining power and do some bargaining with the big operators and tell them, well, this is something we can't accept, please change it. And they might have a chance to influence those companies, whereas one single user never has a chance to make a difference there.
Do you think it will work though? Because I think there's good companies out there, right? And then there's also users who take advantage of the company. I've seen both sides. But however, there's other companies without really good customer service, and they kind of operate as like a god, where you contact them but there's no response ever, and they basically own
Mhm.
our data. So if I have like a data agent, would they even respond to my data agent? Because they surely don't respond to me.
Well, the data agent could be an automated program like the DNT, the Do Not Track policy. and they will evaluate their privacy policy. This can be done partly if it's in a structured form automatically, or it can be done manually. And then you're presented with a privacy policy, and somebody is telling you, well, this is a good policy, it is a green light, and then you can tell your computer, please automatically accept all privacy policies with a green light, and you are not bothered anymore by any consent forms. At the same time, there are privacy policies that are quite bad, and those bad policies are either completely blocked or presented to you, and you can decide, well, should I accept it nevertheless or not? So you have more information. At the same time, once you have accepted it, who is keeping the trace of all the privacy policies that you have accepted? Basically nobody. You have the right to ask companies what they do with your data, but you have no overview of all the privacy policies ever accepted. So you can't go back and say, well, what did I consent to 2 years ago to this company, and what are they doing now? You have no overview of that, and this is something that could be fixed as well in a technical manner by agents, by data protection unions that will help you to exercise your rights.
So that could be on the blockchain as a blockchain project as well. And I think California is going to have a privacy agency, which is really awesome, just dedicated on privacy.
Yeah. When I talked about privacy agents, I meant software agents. Software agents that will automatically process
Yeah.
and evaluate certain privacy policies.
Yeah, I think that's really cool. I understood what you mean, and so that's why I suggested that also could be a blockchain application, whether you consent to a blockchain or not, or what you read could be on the chain, and just tracking the privacy policy as well as our data. It'd be kind of nice that we could basically have a protocol that toggle our data and what we wanted to share to third parties as well. So yeah, I love your idea. I think it's super awesome.
Thank you.
And is there anything that you wanted to share that I haven't asked?
Well, we talked about quite some things. Data union thing might be something of the future, because some people who are really trying to abolish consent because they say it's not working. But I think we should rather fix it. And blockchain can be used to put those privacy policies or validation of those privacy policies on a blockchain, to have a proof what kind of privacy policy you have accepted 2 years ago, and then to see whether some company is violating their own privacy policy or not.
And I think that will provide, I think more privacy discussion in the community would allow us to be safe, because we don't want stalkers, we don't want to be cyber bullied as consumers, as a person. And I think that's really important as well. There's just different levels of it, because we don't want our employers to stalk us. You know, we don't want better relationship people to stalk us, right? We don't want strangers to make us feel unsafe. We don't want the government to look at us like 24/7. It's much like 1984. So I'm hoping that by looking at privacy and how do we design our system with privacy in mind, how do we create that perfect balance, right? I guess imperfectly perfect balance, so that we can make our technology better to enhance our lives, right? And make a better digital society, as you said. I think that may be the goal.
There's not much to add to it. I completely agree.
And what is one advice you would like to provide to the larger community? And your advice could be about anything.
Okay. Well, when it goes up, when you're going to develop a blockchain project, of course, you should always ask, do I need a blockchain? Blockchain is not really efficient in many cases, and it provides some real good advantages. But if you don't need those advantages, it's not a good idea to use blockchain. It might be even a bad idea to use blockchain, because you might run into privacy issues. So you have to think about your application and what part of the application really needs to be immutable. And when you have a good reason for immutability, use blockchain and it can serve you quite well. Put a lot of effort into the design of your system. And then you can write the legalese later, but you need to have a privacy compliant design. That's the most important part. And privacy is not just, and data protection is not just a legal topic. It's a topic it's as well a technical topic,
Mm-hmm.
and you need really to combine those two backgrounds in order to find a good solution.
I agree with you. And where can people find you?
Well, you can find me on my webpage. You can find me in Geneva. I'm talking at conferences. I'm talking at the W3C Congress in Leipzig, which is happening between Christmas and New Year. It's the biggest hacker congress in the world, and it's happening always at the end of the year. And last year it was always at Leipzig. And I will be talking at the WEF, the World Economic Forum, as well, because blockchain is very important for development, for refugees identification. So we have quite a lot of projects who address sustainable development.
Mm-hmm.
And so otherwise, you can find me on LinkedIn, you can find me on Twitter, send me a mail, whatever. You find my contact.
Awesome. Thank you for your time, John. Appreciate you being here.
Thank you for your interview. It was a pleasure to talking to you.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.